Well, welcome to our IFMA We hybrid event on what I consider to be the most critical issue of our time, which is combating climate change, impacting climate change, and building a sustainable workplace, which at the IFMA organization, we can make a huge difference in this area. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. In case you don't know me, my name is Christina DeBono. I'm the president and founder of ClearTech, commercial audiovisual company, and also a co-leader with the IFMA Workplace Evolutionaries group here in Southern California. And I'm co-hosting this event this evening with my partner in crime, Holly Rao, who's the managing director of People Space and is graciously hosting this event, has provided the showroom and also has arranged with the building management to provide this beautiful conference center for our panel discussion. So this event is being recorded. So after the event, we will be getting out the recorded presentation and panel discussion to everyone who's here and those who may not have been able to attend this evening. And when I say this is truly a hybrid event, half of our panelists are here in person, and half of our panelists and our moderator, Eric Teichholz, is joining us remotely, virtually, and half of the audience is virtual as well. So, and we have people who've joined us from all over the country today, which is very, very exciting. I want to thank our sponsors who've really worked tirelessly to put this event together. I want to give a big shout out to Panasonic, who provided all the professional video equipment. We have this, beautiful video cameras that are being switched depending on who's speaking. And then we have our representatives from Shure, who's provided all the audio equipment, all the microphones that the panelists are wearing, and making sure that everything is completely attenuated so that you get beautiful audio quality along with your video quality. So thank you so much. Also, I want to give a special thanks to our tech team led by Adam Mejia. When I came in here, I said, oh, everyone looks so relaxed. They're sitting back in their seats, so that means I don't have to worry. I want to have Holly come up for a moment and speak about People Space and the conference center here and her involvement also with the IFMA We group.
This is like, gonna test my balance. Good thing I'm a former figure skater. Still got my balance. All right, thank you. It's so hard to believe that a year ago, right, May 5th, we kicked off a first physical event after a full year of COVID, right? But from, a rising tide came lifted shifts, right? Like we found both challenge and opportunity from being hybrid, innovation, community, villages, really. And that's what today is made up of. It's just like this repository of villages from the ground crew all the way to the planners. And it's just a privilege to continue the effort of sharing ideas and also just being on this journey together. So thank you for all of you that have attended and stayed tuned to what is coming in the near future and what we're managing right now. So People Space, we're a sponsor tonight, but also a very privileged member of Workplace Evolutionaries and a long time committed member and participant within IFMA. And why we're here is we're focused on the future. We're focused on what is now and what is around the corner. That intersects people, right, which is in our name, technology, and how we create and connect all of those things in between, but how we do it responsibly. You may have noticed tonight we're a LEED and WELL certified space, so we don't ever build without people in mind. LEED is to the built environment as well is to people, and so what I'm getting at is a holistic approach, and tonight is exactly that, including of both past, present, and future. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the enthusiasm, the support ongoing of Workplace Evolutionaries. Diane Coles, a founder of WE, we're very privileged to have right here in the second row. And thank you very much.
Diana, just a minute. So I just wanted to quickly share with you what WE's all about. It stands for Workplace Evolutionaries, and it's a group of global leaders who are leading in the transformation of the workplace. This was started about 5 years ago at this point, and nothing could be more significant than now as far as workplace transformation. We've seen dramatic shifts in the past 2 years, so we're really at the forefront of looking at what are the trends, where is the workplace going now and in the future. And so that's what Workplace Evolutionaries is all about. Check out our website for more information, and I encourage you to become part of our group. In fact, we're also looking for more people who want to take a leadership role, who might want to join our planning committee for future events. So we're going to be providing insightful resources post this event that relate to the topics that we'll be discussing this evening. So we'll be getting that out along with the recorded video. Next, I want to introduce Diane Coles-Levine, the Executive Director of the IFMA Foundation. We're excited to shine a spotlight on the IFMA Foundation Sustainable Professional Scholarship Program and the upcoming Sustainable Development Conference in June. So here is Diane to tell us more about it.
While I was a figure skater, I wasn't going to jump over this in my boots. I'm just so pleased to see how the WE Hub is growing here in Southern California under Christina's leadership. And Holly, congratulations on your success. I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about the IFMA Foundation and a couple of programs that are coming up. The IFMA Foundation is the charitable arm of IFMA. We're a nonprofit 501c3. Our mission is to make facility management a career choice. We're all about workforce development, degree programs, and educational programs. You'll see on the screen Eric Teichholz. Eric Teichholz has given us several years ago a major donation for sustainability facility professional scholarships. We started out giving 3 a year, and Eric grew this global committee, and they have been out soliciting for more sponsors for these scholarships. And I'm happy to announce that we will be giving away 15 sustainability facility professional scholarships this year. If you know of anyone interested in applying, the applications are due by June 30th. You can go on our website, foundation.ifma.org. SDI, one of our presenters, is one of our newest sponsors of these scholarships. So we're very, very excited that Eric led the charge on this, and he's been a leader at IFMA in sustainability, and we're very privileged to have him here tonight, together with John McGee, who's also on his team. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the IFMA Foundation produces publications. We also occasionally have summits to create those publications, and we have a summit coming up on June 23rd and June 24th, and the summit is all about connecting facility management to the 17 UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. We've got some amazing speakers. It's 2 mornings. In California, the time is 6:30 to 10:30. Sorry about that. We had to accommodate Europe as well. So we have 4 speakers from the United Nations. Susan Angus is also going to be one of our presenters. We have Tensi Whalen from New York University Stern School of Sustainability. She has written several articles for Harvard Business Review on how to sell sustainability to your CEO and CFO. We've got Dr. Mark Bernstein. He's here in LA. Someone that you need to know. He's all about conducting peer-reviewed research on clean building technology. There's several presenters from University College London, and it's just going to be an amazing panel of folks, but it's also going to be an interactive session where we want you to participate in helping us to create, to develop this publication, and could be a series of podcasts as well, on how facility managers can really impact the SDGs. So I hope you can join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Very exciting. Next, I would like to introduce our moderator. We've already spoken about him, Eric Teichholz, and our panel of experts who will address how to create a sustainable workplace and how it's closely linked to reversing the devastating impact of climate change. This panel discussion will explore ways to create a sustainable workplace through emissions and waste reduction, carbon capture, and renewable power generation. We'll discuss environmental technologies addressing renewable energy creation, energy saving, storage, and management. The panel will share examples of establishing net zero facilities through renewable power generation, the sustainable use of materials, reuse of parts, and product recycling. We will also be addressing how climate change is closely linked to sustainable development, how the adoption of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, in the workplace provides a framework for addressing the link between global warming, achieving the SDG goals, including ending poverty, reducing inequalities, and climate action. Our moderator joining us remotely is Eric Teichholz, IFMA fellow who graduated with a master's degree in architecture from the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University, where he later became an associate professor and associate director of the university's largest R&D facility. He's the author and editor of 17 books related to facility management and GIS technology. In 2021, Eric and the IFMA Foundation established the Eric Teichholz Sustainable Professional Scholarship. So we have a great team of panel experts. Dean Stanbury is with us, and he has more than 20 years of broad-based experience in facility management. Dean serves on the IFMA Board of Trustees and is past chair of the Environmental Stewardship, Utilities and Sustainability Community, and chairs the Government Affairs Committee. Dean is currently the second vice chair of IFMA's Global Board of Directors. You can switch to put Dean so that people know who Dean is. Okay, the next panelist is Dave Thompson, the Director of Corporate Environmental Department for Panasonic, there he is, North America. Since 1995, he has led Panasonic's Corporate Environmental Department, which is responsible for environmental compliance for facilities, products, state and federal government policy issues, and developing recycling programs for Panasonic products. David also serves as president of the Electronic Manufacturer Recycling Management Company, a joint venture that is developing and managing electronic product recycling programs on behalf of the electronic product manufacturers. The next is John McGee, who is up there before. He's the past chairman of the board of the IFMA Global IFMA Association. His background includes senior management experience in the semiconductor, industrial process control, building controls, facility management, energy storage, rail and transportation, and integrated work management systems. Next is Aris. Now this is the in-person panelist now. Aris Hovasapian is the Utility Program Manager for the Los Angeles Community College District, the largest community college district in the United States. Aris serves in an advisory and support role for energy, utilities, and sustainability issues for LACCD's 9 colleges. Aris proposed, authored, and successfully advocated for the passage of LACCD's landmark Clean Energy and Sustainability Resolution in 2020, which committed LACCD to be 100% carbon-free by 2040. Next, we have Chris Verreger. He is the Vice President of Supply Chain Solutions for SDI. Chris has 30 years of experience in industrial manufacturing and supply chain management. Last but absolutely not least, Susan Angus is the Executive Director of the Commission on Voluntary Service and Action, or CVSA, which is an independent nonprofit organization promoting volunteer opportunities with over 200 NGOs representing people and communities addressing social, economic, and environmental problems throughout North America. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's going to be moderating our panel discussion this evening.
Hello, Los Angeles. I'm speaking to you from Boston. It's a pleasure to be here. Since that picture that was flashed up before of me, this is probably the first time I'm wearing a tie since then. And I might add, it's amazingly uncomfortable. I'm glad that I gave it up for the time of period. I'm going to suggest a very minor change in the program, in the sense that I asked the speakers, the subject matter experts for the topics that you see on the screen, to speak for 5 or 6 minutes, and then have, one of the panelists either comment or ask a question, and I'll call on the panelists to respond to the talk that they just heard. If we do that, we're going to probably eat up a good part of an hour. So I think what I'd like to do, with your permission, is to save the Q&A on the part of the audience and have you submit your questions into a chat box or some other format, and I'll have the panelists respond to them in writing when we distribute the presentation and the slide deck that's going to be created now. So that's the format, and that's we'll stick to that program, the program change, if we can, just so that we can get through the speakers. We have six presentations on very important topics then that relate to this subject. So why don't we start now and go to the next slide. And our first presenter is going to be Dean, who's going to talk about carbon capture and carbon reduction. Dean.
Thank you, Eric. Well, I guess I'm the one that gets to tee this up and talk about the elephant in the room. So carbon impact, global warming, major cause of carbon. So we're spewing 152 million tons of man-made carbon into this thin shell of our atmosphere every 24 hours, as if it were an open sewer. In 1950, fossil fuel pollution contributed to about 1 billion metric tons of carbon per year. Today, that number is near 10 billion metric tons. During that same period, we've seen a rise in the average global surface temperature of over 1 degree Celsius, which is approximately 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, atmospheric CO2 has gone from 320 parts per million in the 1950s to 420 parts per million today, which is higher than ever recorded, or that they've been able to determine over 800,000 years of data that they've pulled from ice cores. The World Health Organization estimates that approximately 7 million people per year die of indoor and outdoor air pollution. So, commercial buildings contribute to about 40% of that global CO2 emissions. And with approximately 80% of those emissions attributable to operational carbon, the facility management profession has a substantial role to play in the path to carbon neutrality. Next slide, please. Okay, so carbon impact, we talk about much of the conversation we have around carbon emission focuses on emission reductions. But what about the emissions that cannot be eliminated? And that's where carbon sequestration comes in, which is the process involved in carbon capture and long-term storage of atmospheric carbon dioxide. So one option for carbon capture and storage that involves capturing CO2 at the point it's generated and redirecting it into long-term storage, which is typically, an underground type of capacity. Another option for carbon capture and reuse is there are processes and products to utilize CO2, such as growing algae and bacteria. Of course, they don't need as much as we produce, so that's just one area that we can use it, but it's not going to solve all the problems. And then another one is the bioenergy carbon capture, which really mimics the processes in nature that take in and store CO2, which is photosynthesis. Most people know that plants and trees store CO2, but once a tree is cut down or it dies, the process of decomposition releases that stored CO2 back into the atmosphere. So deforestation is a major concern. As you know, not only removing the natural carbon sink, but we're releasing massive amounts of stored CO2 as the forests are cleared. The oceans also absorb about 25% of the atmospheric CO2, but that comes at a cost as well. Higher CO2 levels in the ocean are making the water more acidic, which is detrimental to sea life. Next slide, please. So we all know we must reduce man-made carbon, but what can we do and how do we measure our progress? The Greenhouse Gas Protocol defines scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So the first, scope 1, is direct emissions. That's from company-owned and controlled resources. In other words, emissions are released into the atmosphere as a direct result of a set of activities at a firm level. Scope 2, indirect emissions or owned emissions, are from the generation of purchased electricity or energy from the utility provider. So all greenhouse gas emissions released from the atmosphere from the consumption of purchased electricity, steam, heat, and cooling. And lastly, scope 3 emissions are the indirect or not owned. This is emissions not included in scope 2 that occur in the value chain for a reporting company, including both upstream and downstream emissions. So these are emissions linked to a company's operations, things they acquire and things that they produce or destroy. Mitigation opportunities are really vast and varied, and we won't solve climate change with just one or two big things. It will require thousands of little things. No emission reduction opportunity is too small or inconsequential to act upon and to track. Next slide, please. So getting things done. Many parts of the tropics, currently home to about 3 billion people, will experience unlivable heat and humidity if global temperatures rise more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And it's not just the heat, it will also affect global health, food production, access to fresh water, access to breathable air. Extreme weather is anticipated to create about 1.3 billion climate refugees. And think about this. You can live for about 3 minutes without air, about 3 days without water, and perhaps 1 to 2 months without food. So the human window of existence is really much smaller than most people realize. This is not somebody else's problem, it's humanity's problem, and it will take a collective effort of all humanity to solve it. So I'll leave you with this. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Your world depends on it. Thank you.
Next slide, please. We have a little placemat slide between each of the presentations. I'm going to call on one of the other panelists to either comment or ask a question that relates to this. And Chris, you're going to be our leadoff questioner from the panel, just based on what you heard from Dean. Do you want to make some kind of comment?
Sure. Thanks, Dean. That was a great presentation. As a concerned human being, I guess part of the human race, we see all these statistics and it just seems so dire. Best case scenario, if industries and organizations were successful in reversing these trends, what would be the prognosis for us here? How long would it take to get the planet, that big flywheel spinning, or at least stopping and beginning to spin in the opposite direction?
Well, that is definitely an unknown. The Earth goes through different cycles, climate cycles and so forth, but those things usually happen over about a 6,000 year period. So, species and plants and the environment has a chance to adapt. What we've seen is that same cycle has really occurred in about the last 100 years. So we're seeing a lot of species dying off, because they can adapt fast enough. I think it's pretty much settled that there will be some effects of climate change that we won't be able to avoid. And all we can really do is look at, where are those things going to occur? Rising sea levels, our coastal areas are going to change. We see, rain and flooding. We see drought in the West, with things drying up. There's only so much fresh water. We have all the fresh water we're ever going to have on the planet today, but we don't always have it where we need it now. And so those are some of the things that we're going to have to take a look at and adapt to, which is probably what we can do. But it really does require that everybody pull together and try to reduce that atmospheric CO2 and reduce the worst effects of greenhouse gas and surface temperatures. Does that answer the question?
Thank you, Dean. We're going to move on anyway. The next speaker is going to be John McGee, who's going to talk about the technology that relates that Dean pretty much discussed in terms of the picture that he presented. John, do you want to start, please?
Yes. Thanks, Eric. I'll just apologize up front. I got back from Europe last night to my home in Georgia with strep throat and jet lag. So if I cough a few times, I hope you'll stay with me on it. Eric, I'm going to go straight to slide 2, and then I'll good. What I'd like to do is talk about climate change programs, but start with maybe outlining some constraints that basically illustrates that climate change programs do not start with technology. It's the 4th step in this process, but executing a well thought through technology strategy is critical. And that's done within the context where a lot of the low hanging fruit may already been achieved via a BMS that has already been implemented years previously, a strong IWMS deployment. So essentially making improvements can be quite complex to achieve meaningful change. Another set of constraints is that FMs do not typically own the overall strategy. That belongs to the C-suite. FMs do not own the technology decision. That can many times belong to the CIO within the C-suite. But FMs own the operational management, the analytics associated with the climate change initiatives. They are basically responsible for implementing the improvements and by extension driving the returns many times, either hard savings or the soft savings. So it's really important upfront. I'd like to state that the FM needs to be a very strong partner, part of the evaluation team when it comes to technology, part of the approval process, has a big say in the configuration of how a platform or the applications are implemented. They will always own the ongoing analytics and own the rollout of the improvements. And that last point then drives a lot of times, if there is an ROI associated with the programs, the facility manager has a large part of making that happen. Eric, next slide. If I add another constraint, and I won't dwell on this slide, I'd really like to try to keep my slides practical. So the last two slides will hit specific recommendations, but another complexity is that many times for a large portfolio with a complex program and a portfolio of buildings, there is quite complex decisions to be made around what technology decisions are needed to be made. This is a slide from McKinsey's where the paper really focused on where investments are being made at the moment, but it nevertheless brings out five very, very key areas: electrification, agriculture, power grid, hydrogen, and carbon capture. For facility managers in general, I could abstract from that slide and say for complex portfolios and complex programs, we're really looking at decisions around efficient business technologies. That would be traditional platforms such as the BMS and IWMS, but it nowadays also implies decisions around AIoT, plus renewables, plus storage, battery storage, and where control of energy and energy efficiency and energy initiatives, we're also talking about many times integration with the grid. So very, very complex set of technology decisions do have to be made when the programs are large. Luckily for a lot of us as facility managers, the programs are not the portfolios are smaller and the programs are less intense. And I'd like to scope the last two slides down to that type of opportunity for a facility manager and make some very specific recommendations. Next slide, Eric. First recommendation, I would say, is focus on carbon reduction as the primary driver, and that in turn drives some of the technology decisions, but do it in the context with a focus on the entire value chain. So that implies making the supply chains traceable and transparent. Many times it's a better initial approach, if it's not already underway, is to leverage partner technologies and partner experience. And SDI is coming up in its presentation a little later, and that's the type of partner and the type of technologies that I'd be referring to there. Rather than try to cover everything to drive reduction, I would say primarily focus on energy, water, and fuel efficiency. Because the applications and the tools are quite mature at this stage, particularly if it's transaction tracking and management, AI and the regression type functionality is still maturing. But energy, water, and fuel efficiency, and within that energy will give the biggest bang for the buck from a technology support standpoint. If the opportunity is there, I would focus on subscription models rather than on-site solutions. Again, leveraging the investments that partners have put into the functionality, and it's more of a transactional and operating cost. If subscription models are the way that a facility management or a program is rolled out, then it's obviously critically important to work with IT to ensure data privacy and security. And lastly, and it ties to the data privacy and security, with the move to new hybrid working models and with remote workers working on initiatives that are connected to or are a fundamental part of a climate change program with a strategy within the company, then again, ensuring that security and making information available to those remote workers becomes critically important. So technology runs right through it. Eric, last slide. And within that, if I scope it further, and the Better Buildings within the Department of Energy said it very well when they said, when pursuing a decarbonisation plan, lead with energy efficiency. So essentially, scoping it down to that, energy efficiency gives it advances the carbon reduction objectives. It has a very positive impact on building costs. It can identify asset and operational issues. And if I digress for one quick moment, I was personally involved in developing some models for 17 campus portfolio, and the models didn't work as such because they identified operational issues, and the facility management team were in a position to realize $2 million of savings per annum with no capital investment. So even though one might be pursuing carbon reduction and within that energy efficiency and within that the associated accomplishment of the targets within the climate strategy, other ancillary benefits such as identifying asset and operational issues become many times available. Great big advantage of energy efficiency. There is mature energy platforms out there, either provided by a service provider or standalone on-site or subscription-based models. So lots of opportunities there to advance an energy efficiency program at an accelerated pace. And then at a level down from that, there are excellent AI and regression tools available to basically model the environment and focus on energy consumption optimization. AI is still maturing, of course. Simple regression, multiple regression tools are quite very mature at this moment in time. So what I tried to do in my 6 minutes, Eric, is talk about some constraints, the complexity of some of the larger scale programs, and try to scope it down to specific sets of recommendations and get it done in 6 minutes with strep throat.
So thank you, John. Your 6 minutes turned into 9.5. So
that's an Irish 6.
So I think what we'll do is, Dean, I know that you were supposed to respond to this, but can I ask you to put your question down in writing, and I'll have this as part of the responses that go out, with the deck and the presentation, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so you got off easy, Dean. Our third presentation is by Chris, and it has to do with supply chain. So why don't we move directly into that?
Yes, thank you. So can you hear me okay, everybody? Yeah. So what I'd like to speak to today is how to drive a sustainable FM workplace, and the fact that it starts with visibility. And I'm going to give an example at the end of the presentation as to how one of the progressive FM leaders has aligned their FM strategy with the parts supply chain and how that has impacted climate change for them. It's going to make a dramatic impact. Visibility obviously is the key component here. In the parts supply chain today, the global market is worth about $650 billion for MRO or FM parts, and about $150 billion of that is in the U.S. It's a highly fragmented supply base, so there's no single supplier or organization that distributes or sells more than 7% of it. What does this mean? It's very high in volume, and it's low value transactions. So when you look at that and you stratify it, there's a lot of cost to managing this supply chain, and it's a micro supply chain. We estimate that managing the transactional cost for or a purchase order, for example, range from $175 to $250. That's the labor, the touching of the paper, all the way from requisition to the payable of the supplier. The supply chain is very immature. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years. And for the most part, companies are doing it the same way that they've been doing it 30, 40, 50 years ago. Sometimes Excel spreadsheets are used. Still, I mean, Excel is a great tool, but it doesn't give you a lot of visibility as to past trends on material usage or give you any true analytics. So this process has been very, very reactive, and nobody in organizations really owns this portion of the supply chain. It's so cumbersome and difficult to manage that it's basically underserved. And given the fact that this immaturity exists today in these organizations, coupled with supply chain shortages, everybody's heard about the geopolitical issues, the pandemic, what's happened, the ships offshore here lining up for miles and miles. The fact that this is an immature portion of the supply chain from a management standpoint means that the risk for us is greater than ever. Of course, not having visibility into this part of the supply chain weakens your ability also for any sustainability initiatives. The FMs are behind on this part of managing and looking at the supply chain and these sustainability initiatives, but not for long. As some of the challenges that are being faced today by FMs are challenges that other industries have faced them as well, particularly around data. To start with, data is the foundation to having an understanding of what needs to be addressed in your supply chain, and it's the foundation for identifying any improvements, and any sustainability initiatives would come from having clarity and visibility to that data. The data drives actionable analytics, and today approximately 95% of organizations have data in their systems that is inactionable. So basically it's not very useful to drive any type of initiative. Inventory. Again, the pandemic brought to the foreground that while we were living pre-COVID with lean initiatives and just-in-time inventories, and that was wonderful for a while and driving down costs, it didn't prepare our industries and the FMs as well in that group for any geopolitical issue that may happen, any global change. We were kind of living on the thinnest of margins with inventories. So what's going to be required now, and it's going to be a bit of a challenge on the cost side, is that organizations are going to have to look into their supply chain, this portion of the supply chain for maintenance parts, identify critical parts, critical spares, invest in the appropriate inventories so that they can survive the next unknown that may happen in the supply chain. Sustainability costs are going to be increasing for organizations. The U.S. is lagging in this area. Essentially, about $1,400 is spent per year by location in the U.S. on sustainability projects or initiatives. And this compares to about $4,700 per location for international locations. So lots of room for opportunity for growth here and for refocusing for the U.S. And everybody has to step up and do their part. Now, there are enablers to be able to address these challenges. Today, more than ever, there's open APIs that facilitate integration between CMMS systems and ERP systems, so the systems can talk to each other and be smart about the activities that are going on. There's data management and analytics that can provide real-time reporting so that organizations can understand supplier performance, pricing, and kind of bounce that off to market pricing to understand if their costs are in line. KPIs or metrics for their labor force, in particular the technicians in the field in the supply chain is a critical metric for FMs. It's first call completion. How many times when a tech goes out to complete a work order, are they able to actually finish that work order in a timely fashion? There's a lot of opportunities for reducing waste and optimizing the technician's time if the analytics and the program is there to be able to give them the tools that they need. There's also e-sourcing solutions that enable procurement to touch the spend and interact with suppliers on a real-time basis more than ever, kind of pulling back the curtain, if you will, and being able to impact that. Also, applications. Everybody has their smartphones. Today, it's nothing unusual to have 1 million apps on there. Where there's applications, there's mobile solutions that the supply chain can adopt, where the field technician can now have, regardless of their location, have access to platforms where they can order materials and have visibility to the supply chain and drive compliance, particularly around ESG initiatives. Also, source-to-pay systems can link businesses, finance, and procurement effectively, and again, aligning to ESG goals for the organization. The idea here is that you want to maximize supplier compliance, and you can monitor the activity that's happening through that reporting. So coming out of the pandemic, FM departments have a unique opportunity to drive operational improvements and at the same time reduce costs and waste systematically. You know, in the past, and it's still the case today, companies always are focused around piece pricing as the main driver for making any type of change in their companies, looking at cost. However, there's much more in the supply chain than just piece pricing. And in fact, if you look at the total cost of the supply chain, the piece pricing is one of the smallest slivers of the overall cost. So there's a lot of opportunity for optimizing the processes and maximizing technician productivity, increasing asset uptime, and ultimately improving the in-store customer experience in the case particularly for retailers or for companies that manage large real estate properties. There's also opportunities to create new centers of excellence for manufacturers and suppliers that are compliant with sustainability goals. If you look at in the materials segment in the world of supply chain, some of these examples would be HVAC refrigerants, cleaning supplies, disinfectants, filters and equipment related with indoor air quality. Those are examples, and as well as mission critical spares. And the last point here on this slide is that the FMs have it within their fingertips to put technologies in place so that now only products that sustain and meet sustainability and social responsibility goals are purchased and installed in the facilities. So use the technology to pick the right sources for the products and the right products. The last slide I have here is a use case. This is for a very large retailer, a big box retailer with thousands of locations across North America. Their challenges were similar to the challenges that I mentioned on slide 2 before. They were looking to improve their ordering process. They were looking to decrease work order completion times. They were having parts outages, particularly around HVAC, refrigeration. They were shutting down in-store refrigerators as an example. That was affecting the in-store experience for their clients, as well as bringing other costs and perishable goods that were in the refrigerators that were lost, liabilities involved, and on and on and on. These are revenue-generating assets that were suffering as a result, and ultimately, if their in-store experience diminished, the cost of the bottom line here was much greater than any investment they could look at making in technology. That's what I said about earlier. Is there's a huge cost to doing things the wrong way when it comes to the supply chain, and sometimes spending a little bit of money up front will save potentially your entire business. The solution that we put in place here is a single payer platform with omni-channel supplier fulfillment. And this platform, which is a mobile platform, the techs will be able to access on their iPads or Androids or iPhones, going in through their CMMS system. In this example, its service channel is the work order management system that this particular company utilizes, integrates with what we call the Zeus system, the Zeus platform. We loaded that platform with over 180 suppliers, existing suppliers for this client to start with. That continues to evolve and grow and change as the focus for their business changes and as they start looking at other initiatives, ESG being a major one moving forward. I'll get to that in a moment, how that's impacting that. Now, there's availability around real-time order and shipping tracking with comprehensive analytics coming out of it. Again, so now the visibility is there. As a result of washing, if you will, all the transactions through the platform and having true actionable data, now opportunities can be identified and improvements and plans for improvement can be made. Also brought to light the opportunity with this client for them to be able to start engaging their suppliers in the climate action to avoid 1 billion metric tons, in other words, a gigaton of greenhouse gases from the global value chain by 2030. So this was previously not possible for them because they had approximately 2,000 techs in the field. A vast majority of the parts spend that was going through the techs in the work order management system, they had zero or very poor visibility to. But now by having it coming through the platform, they can identify companies that can be compliant with their ESG initiatives and start driving these incredible changes to the business that will contribute in this manner. Also, they have improved visibility in supplier scorecards. They can start seeing which suppliers are not performing, which are not getting parts shipped on time. The optimization and capability there is to be able to ensure that the tech understands when a part's going to be shipped and it actually happens, That way there's not any wasted time going back and forth waiting or looking for parts, and they can complete the work order first time, and that's the first time completion metric.
Chris, I might have to interrupt because we're running late on this. So
Okay.
can I ask you to close it? Closing statement?
Yeah, so that, my last comment was that there's also a positive impact to reducing energy consumption, waste reduction, and parts usage design, and optimizing transportation.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
the presentations are great, but I'm afraid that the panel Q&A is sort of suffering because of that, and because we got a little bit of a late start. So I'm gonna ask Aris to start his presentation on renewable power generation, please.
I'll talk fast. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Christina, for organizing this wonderful event and inviting me to speak. Can everybody hear me okay? My name is Aris Hovasapian, Utility Program Manager for Los Angeles Community College District, and essentially I'm the energy manager for the 9 community colleges. Can I hit the next slide, please? So just a little bit about LACCD. It's the largest community college district in the nation. There's a little map, or a big map, I guess, with the red dots showing where our colleges are. We cover a lot of ground in the region and have 9 colleges. And by way of comparison, the second largest district, San Diego, I believe San Diego has 4 colleges. So we're more than twice as big as any other district in the state of California. And our 230,000 students in our district is actually more than the entirety of the UC system that serves the entire state. Next slide. So just a little more about LACCD from the energy and utility side. 9 colleges, just 1 district office, and 3 other properties. We have 2 electric utilities, 5 water agencies, 1 natural gas utility, and 3 energy suppliers. 150 buildings, 7.5 million square feet, $9.6 billion authorized for new construction over 20 years. We spend over 13 million on energy annually, and we have 10.6 megawatts of installed solar photovoltaics across our portfolio. I guess we've covered a lot of this previously today, but just the climate crisis is a global emergency. The IPCC 2018 report recommended net zero carbon emissions by 2050 to avoid irreversible impacts. And I want to pause here, and I know Christina kind of asked me to speak about this. The 2018 IPCC report, for me personally, was kind of a watershed moment where my first child was born. My son was born in September of 2018. This IPCC report came out in October of 2018. And in one of the articles that I was reading about it, the opening paragraph said, somebody else that is born today in 20 years may see irreversible impact on the planet. And that really hit home for me. And kind of led me to realize that at my workplace, if nobody's going to take this thing on, then I have to be the one that takes this thing on with respect to sustainability and what our responsibilities are with respect to climate and environment. So apologies for that digression there, but back to the presentation. The August 21 report from IPCC was even more dire. Massive and immediate cuts in emissions. So we are a little behind on this thing as a civilization, I would say. Most closely emissions are tied to transportation and energy, and California's been the tip of the spear on reducing carbon emissions, including the passage of SB 100 most recently in 2018 that all electricity has to come from zero carbon sources. So, while we've been talking about the UN goals, my work has been a little more local and regional focused on what are the immediate measures that we can institute and policies that we can institute to affect change with respect to climate and environment, which takes us to the resolution that LACCD passed in 2020. So the big top line goal is 100% carbon free by 2040. Within that, we want to get to 100% renewable carbon free electricity by 2030. The 2040 goal, the difference between those is that the 2040 goal is also considering decarbonization and electrification of all combustion uses. So any boilers, water heaters, diesel generators, landscape tools, electrify all of that by 2040, and then get carbon-free electricity by 2030. We have some big transportation goals. The biggest one is to provide EV charging at 25% of all parking stalls. That's a really, really big number, and has been actually my focus of the last few weeks and months. And our board committed $75 million to achieve these goals. These are just some of the top line goals. There's goals and targets and objectives in many, many sustainability categories that we're going to be pursuing, including establishment of a green revolving fund, establishment of a 2040 plan, and other measures. So again, some of the other speakers spoke about this before, where if you want to do decarbonization, you have to do energy efficiency. There's no one-shot solution to any of this. And even though my topic is renewables here, renewables are not the end-all be-all solution to anything. Everything has to work in concert with each other. There's interactive effects. You have emissions impacts from all types of activities and operations, especially combustion. Obviously, that's your scope 1 emissions, but your scope 2 and then your scope 3 with your commutes and your business travel and other activities. All these have an impact, and it's I can't remember which speaker it was, but they said it's about doing a thousand little things. It's actually hundreds of thousands of little things that we have to do, rather than one big solution that can address these issues and get us aligned to a more habitable future. And then, before I wrap it up, I want to ask everybody for a little bit of a mental exercise. I want you to think about how old you were and what stage of life you were in when you discovered global warming. And contrast that to not only community college students today that have been living with that fact for their entire life, but even younger children, elementary school, middle school, preschool, like my son is in preschool, and the knowledge that this was all preventable, and we didn't act fast enough or aggressively enough or boldly enough. And back to what I believe Mr. McGee was saying about the C-suite makes these decisions, and that's something that I've encountered myself, is that nobody really disputes the science or the facts of climate change or the climate crisis. It's really the urgency or the degree to which we must act that's been the hardest thing to convince people about. And that's just my experience. So the decision makers, the C-suite, the executives, who may be of a different generation than I, who may have found out about climate change at a different age than I did. Climate crisis. I try to avoid using change. It's not change. Change is too neutral a term. Climate crisis, climate emergency. And a lot of my work has been more social than technical. A lot of my work is convincing people of convincing my organization of the urgency of the need to act, not convincing them of the science, of the technicalities of global temperature warming or global ocean warming. So please, if you take one thing away from the panel today, think about that. What are we doing to convince those around us, especially decision makers and executives, politicians? What are we doing to make sure that we're doing everything we can from where we sit, from the position that we occupy, to improve the situation? It's a tall order, and it's hard to stay positive all the time. But we just got to put our head down and do the work. So I'll end it with that. Thank you.
Interesting. And again, we don't have time.
Interesting is an interesting word.
Absolutely. Next slide. We have to move to the next presentation now.
Please.
David Thompson, show us some of the things that he's doing at Panasonic.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Thompson. I am speaking to you this evening from northern New Jersey. So the sun has gone down and it's getting dark here. But I'm very thankful for the opportunity to speak with the folks at IFMA and all of you to tell you a little bit about what Panasonic is doing to become a more environmentally sustainable company. First, and I don't have a slide up for you, but we are a very large global electronics manufacturer, significant product line ranging from aircraft radar to car electronics to refrigeration equipment, commercial scale, home appliances, consumer electronics, industrial equipment, robotics, batteries, as well as battery-powered sesame seed grinders, which is one of my favorites. We have about 244,000 employees worldwide, have 523 consolidated companies under the Panasonic umbrella. And last year we had 6,699 billion yen in sales. That's about $53 billion at 130 yen per dollar exchange rate. A few months ago, it would have been about $70 billion. But I guess as the dollar increases in value, our sales go down. I'd also like to say one more thing, and that is we have a founding principle that was announced in 1931, I think it was, so it is of historical significance for us, where the role of a manufacturer is to contribute to the betterment of world society through the design and manufacture of products that benefit people in their lives. And as part of that, we acknowledge that society entrusts its resources to us to pursue our goals. So I do want to emphasize that we have a strong link between our foundational principles and sustainability. Now I'd like to move on to this slide. We have taken a leadership role in product stewardship here in the United States. And I know no one was probably thinking about these things in the early 1990s, but I think what we added is this. At that time, many companies were thinking we can secure a competitive advantage through product take back and recycling. But our approach was to say that's not going to work. We really need an industry-wide approach, and we worked to bring battery manufacturers together and founded in 1994 a company now called to Recycle, and we launched a nationwide collection program for rechargeable batteries. And in 2020, I'll say Call to Recycle collected about 8.4 million pounds of rechargeable batteries on behalf of almost 230 companies that support this program. In 2007, we joined with Sharp and Toshiba to form an e-waste management company called the Electronic Manufactured Recycling Management Company. I think that's quite a mouthful, but we call it MRM for short. And the purpose was to bring manufacturers together to collect and recycle products. We currently MRM currently serves about 50 brand owners, operates in 22 states, and collects approximately 115 million pounds of e-waste annually. And that's about 1.34 billion pounds since our beginning. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think we skipped one.
We did.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I want to go back to the next slide. Sorry for the delay. And talk about our Green Impact campaign. And I want to say that annually, Our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions are about 2.2 million tons of CO2 from our business operations. And when you look at our scope 3 emissions, those that result from our entire value chain, from, I guess, the mining of materials, processing to the products use and recycling, we estimate that that this value chain emits about 110 million tons of CO2. And that when you put those two together, our products over the course of their life result in about 1% of the world's total electricity consumption. So we do have a significant impact in our, I'd like to explain what kind of goals we've established under this Green Impact Campaign. And first, we want to reduce our CO2 emissions to net zero by 2030. And of course, work on the design of more energy efficient products going forward. Our long-term goal is by 2050 that we will create more energy through our energy products creation portfolio, such as solar panels and batteries and fuel cells, than our value chain will consume. Next, please. So I don't know that this is so well known, but we are a world leading battery manufacturer. We, for example, helped make the Dustbuster possible, the Motorola flip phone, if you remember that, possible, as well as the Sony Handycam. That was the first palm-sized video camcorder that came out in the 1990s. We also worked very closely with Toyota to make the batteries in the original Toyota Prius. And now, and of course, much more significantly, we are working closely with Tesla to develop and manufacture the batteries behind their Model S, Model 3, and Model Y automobile, which truly have been game changers in the world's automobile market. So in addition to producing EV batteries, we're also producing lithium-ion storage batteries for both household and consumer, or household and industrial or commercial use. For example, we provide storage batteries for the Facebook data centers. Likewise, we market a premium solar panel that delivers sleek design, energy-leading power conversion, and then extreme all-weather durability. And we offer this in combination with a home storage battery system that we market under the Evervolt brand. And lastly, I want to focus a little bit on fuel cells. We have fairly for a long period of time, we produced a home fuel cell cogeneration system, probably about 250,000 units so far. And we've tested this at our Fujisawa Smart City location in Japan, as well in actual homes across the country. What you see here is a picture of a project called Harumi Flag. There's a city complex that will be built on the former site of the Olympic Village in Tokyo, and will be home to a genuine hydrogen infrastructure. So through collaboration with other industries, hydrogen will be supplied via a pipeline, and our pure hydrogen fuel cell will generate electricity. The city has a total of 5 blocks, so nothing big, of course, including 4 residential blocks and 1 commercial block. As a demonstration project, 6 of our 5 kilowatt generators will be installed in each of the 4 cities' residential blocks for a total power generation capacity of 120 kilowatts. This power will be used to generate lighting and air conditioning in common areas. And then lastly, we just launched a larger scale fuel cell project at our factory in Kusatsu, Japan. It's a pilot project that will combine 100 hydrogen fuel cell generators with a combined capacity of 500 kilowatts. These will be combined with a 570 kilowatt solar array, and then a 1.1 megawatt of lithium ion batteries to power the actual factory where our solar cells are being produced. So we're looking forward to moving that forward and develop this fuel cell technology. So I know time is very limited, and I thank you for the opportunity to present our company and explain a few things that we're doing to leverage technologies that we have conceptualized and turn it into a greener approach to our company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I'd like to ask Christina if we could extend the 9:15 deadline for another, 6 or 7 minutes so that Susan can give her presentation on SSGs.
Absolutely. These have been just amazing presentations, and we don't want to miss out on Susan's important presentation.
Okay, thank you. Susan, can you please start your slides? Next slide.
It's just one, thank you. I thought you were going to say, could you please talk fast?
No,
Okay.
I'm not gonna do that. And for the next, we just won't call the next session a panel discussion.
Okay, okay. First, I want to just point out that the most recent IPCC report, which was referred to earlier, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the authoritative grouping of hundreds and hundreds of scientists who put together this report that is recognized by every government. Their most recent report in February of 2022, which was indeed the most dire, the most recent one, it opened with this statement that I'm going to read, it says, this report recognizes the interdependence of climate, ecosystems, and biodiversity, and human societies. This report integrates knowledge across the natural, ecological, social, and economic spheres more strongly than any previous report that they put together. In other words, they found they could not just talk about climate change, that this is a whole of society problem and requires a whole of society solutions. It further says this assessment, this report of climate change impacts, the assessment of the climate change impacts and risks, as well as adapting to what is inevitably going to happen. No matter what we do today and tomorrow, there's going to be catastrophic change already that we cannot stop. So there must be a great deal of adaptation. That this assessment is set against concurrently unfolding non-climate global trends, such as ongoing biodiversity loss, overall unsustainable consumption of natural resources, land and ecosystem degradation, rapid urbanization, human demographic shifts, which is the migration someone referred to earlier, social and economic inequalities, and pandemic, which I might add is not over, and there will be more as long as we keep destroying the ecosystems. So in other words, they found it necessary to deal with a bigger picture in order to talk about the realities that we're facing right now in relation to climate change. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a facility manager. I am an organizer, and I run a nonprofit called Commission on Voluntary Service and Action. We have a couple of volunteers with us here today. And we talk every day at CVSA with grassroots organizations across the country that are on the front lines of dealing with the needs of people in the communities that get wiped out when the mega hurricanes come around, which are coming around more and more frequently, and tornadoes and fires. The groups that go out and distribute food when the need for food increases because wages and fixed incomes no longer can afford, or at the level for people to be able to afford enough decent, healthy food. The groups that take on the EPA to task when they do not do their job, which I'm finding out the more groups I talk to, I can't think of any examples of when they have, don't do their job in cleaning up the toxic dumps that are called superfunds that people live near, and whose children then, their health is being destroyed. The groups that go out and literally try and restore the swamps and the coastal lines and the ecosystems that are otherwise being destroyed by irresponsible energy practices and industrial development. So these are the groups we talk to every day. The groups that are run by volunteers are on the ground dealing with the results of these problems not being solved and trying to solve them. And they're the ones that know best what the solutions are, because they're living with the day-to-day need. But these days, we all are, as was said earlier. And no matter where you live or what your income or what part of the globe you live in, it's gotten to that point. So we assist these groups. We're very familiar with them, and we know that they are very goal-oriented and, like I said, are familiar with what the solutions should be. But none of these groups can solve the problem by themselves, nor can any business, nor can any one industry. And with all that is known, that everyone's been talking about what the thousands and thousands of little things that everyone can do, which all need to be done, what each of us do in our own business, et cetera, isn't going to be enough. We must develop more ways to collaborate, more ways to work together, and more ways to influence those referred to earlier as tier 3 or something like that. But the people that are in power, the people who run the oil companies, the people who are in Congress, the people who make the rules or ignore the rules and get away with it. And so since we can't do it alone, we need to work together more. And that's where the Sustainable Development Goals comes in. It was referred to earlier as the UN SDGs. Now, my organization has NGO consultative status at the United Nations. Before we moved here to LA from New York, we used to get on the subway and go to the UN a lot. And we were at many meetings when they were still debating the SDGs. It was 3 years of debate and international conferences and surveys. Literally millions of people were involved in writing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The 17 goals are a distillation of a 35-page document, which is actually a blueprint, a plan of action for every government. And all 193 governments that are members of the UN unanimously agreed, yes, every country, we agree, we will prioritize these goals and we will carry them out, or we won't have a livable world. And the document itself says that it's the people of each country that must keep the government accountable. So let's expand that. The businesses of each country, the industries of each country, the communities of each country. We need to work together to keep them accountable, which I guess is the other elephant in the room, mentioning elephants earlier. The US government is the only industrial government in the world that has not brought a single report back to the UN about what it's done towards achieving the SDGs, because I don't think it would have much to say. And so that's something else that we need to influence to change. Because as I said earlier, we can't do it ourselves. So we need to develop ways to work together. And so that is, again, where the SDGs come in. Yes, it seems like this is all so much to do. It's big, it's up there, but it's not. It's down here, and it is what every organization and every business can relate to. So at CVSA, we also we study history to learn from it, so that we can understand why we are where we are now. And I think, as was also referred to earlier, it's been some time since they've known about this climate change. It was about 60 years ago when scientists started warning us and warning us and warning us and proving it and proving it. And it was only at the 2015 Paris summit where the Paris Accord was agreed to, where all governments finally agreed that indeed we have to really work to try and not let it rise more than 1.5 degrees since industrial time started, or we're really in big trouble. That was the first time they agreed, in 2015. And at the most recent summit in Glasgow in November of 2021, they all brought their pledges of what they were going to do. And when it was all added up, it still added up to, even if they stick to and do what they pledged, which many of them don't have great track records on, if they stuck to it, we still would reach 2.4 degree increase. Not good enough. So they all pledged to come back at the next summit, which is in, I think, October of 2022 or November of 2022 in Egypt, that they're going to come out with better pledges. Well, I hope they do, and I hope they stick to them, but we can't count on it. And we have to work together and find ways to really take the lead and work together. And so what my main message is, Goal 17 is about partnerships, and Jenny's going to say a couple words about that in a minute. But anything that you can do to collaborate with community organizations. I know you're facility managers and you run businesses and you're not a community group, but there's community groups out there you could partner with. And there are things that when you deal with your plans for the use of your buildings, if it's a building that is, surrounded by a community where there's low-income people, when the next heat wave hits and there's like, hundreds of people who don't have air conditioning, do you have space in your building that could be a cooling center that people could come and like not die of the heat for a couple of days? I mean, there's just so many things that you could reach out and do in partnership with community organizations to make us stronger, to build a stronger voice, to also keep demanding and pushing up towards government. You need to take these goals seriously. We need a plan of action for how we're going to achieve these goals locally, because climate crisis can't be solved if we don't also deal with inequality, poverty, et cetera. The slogan of the SDGs is leave no one behind. So if you can look at your plan of action and say, this helps leave no one behind, then you're on the right track. What CVSA can do is we can help you build those collaborations. And I think I need to pass it to Jenny now.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay.
Can we go to
We're
the
not done.
slide?
We're not done. We're not done. We're done.
I'm just concluding it. I'll be really fast. So she
Oh, I'm
basically
sorry. I'm
said the
sorry.
gist about, yeah, no worries. She said the gist about like building partnerships with these grassroots organizations that are actually in the fronts of fighting against the climate crisis and, actually saving the planet. So just to conclude, we do have our catalog, Invest Yourself, A Guide to Action, which describes these 175 grassroots organizations. There's actually more that we're finding as we're going along the year across the country that we can introduce you to, with whom you could build productive partnerships with. So we ask you to contact us about how you can partner with CVSA or sponsor our work, and ways you can play an important role in the effort to achieve the 2030 SDGs and keep the 1.5 degree limit in the rise of the Earth's temperature. So for those of you that are here, we have a table with more information and when you can sign up and get more info from us in the other room. For those that are here virtually, you can get our information from IFMA, IFMA is going to be sending out our contact information. So we look forward to working together to build a better world. Our lives and future generations depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you go to the slide that says post-event activities, which is 2 slides down from now? There you go. I just wanted to mention that we obviously overreached in the number of topics that we tried to cover, but we also sort of planned, some activities afterwards that would be able to respond to some of the needs. The recording, there is a recording that will be distributed and promoted on various websites within IFMA. The slides in the deck will also contain a resource summary from each of the presentations. So for the people that want to dig deeper, we'll have the availability to do that. The primary conclusions will be, we will ask the panelists basically to write something up as to what their major conclusions are. And we're going to distribute that and potentially turn that into an article that we can issue in some of the activities and some of the magazines and other distribution potential that IFMA has. And finally, since we didn't have a general input from the people that were attending this, we will ask that you send in your questions in writing, and we will ask the panelists to respond to the questions that come in from the audience as well. And for that, our part of the session is over, and I want to thank the panelists for some very interesting and wonderful and knowledgeable presentations that were given. And I'll turn it back to the, I guess, Christina, did you want to close?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for coming, attending this, where we've addressed really the most critical issues of our time that we all collectively need to take action around. And the panelists provided incredibly thoughtful, insightful knowledge and information. So we don't want to leave it here. This is the beginning. We need to wake up tomorrow morning and say, what are we going to do? you know, what each one of us is going to do. Because our world, our future, our planet, our civilization is at stake. So thank you so much. And I welcome everyone to stay for some more drinks and food and conversation. So thank you.
Okay.